Every offseason is different, and everyone has a different puzzle to put together. It all starts with the cap. How do they get after that today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, everybody. This Friday episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Get after it. Today, we are going to have some fun. We have to get to these topics, guys, that we didn't cover yesterday. If you missed our rundown of the free agent class the Chiefs are looking at, go back and listen to yesterday. We left two really off the table because they're intertwined and they're difficult decisions to make. What are the options for Trey Smith's future with this team? That's coming up later in the show. Before that, we have to get to the Nick Bolton decision, both his and the team's. That's coming up next. But how do they fix the cap and what do they do right now? How do they get it done? What are some of the options that we're going to get into first with Chris Clark, my partner here at KC Chiefs Corner, where you can find his written work all on the cap, the numbers, the quarterbacks, everything that you're looking for. He's going to walk us through options, techniques, etc. That's what makes the world go round. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, home of the Athletic Matrix, as well as NFL 33 and RGR Football. Please check out all our other outlets as well. And if you want that much more, after making this your first listen, which we very much appreciate, check out another Locked On show for your next one. Like and sub and do that. And if you want breaking news as this offseason continues, get on the text line at 816-357-8781. We start where we start, and we talked about where the cap is. Now, what do they have to do to fix it? And this is more about technique for me because you know the ins and outs of how these contract negotiations happen. You are the resident cap expert. So lay it out for me just so that I don't confuse it, and neither does the fan base. What's the difference here? Restructure, extension, and what do void years mean? That is one tool in the bag the Chiefs haven't really used.
So they have used void years, but very rarely. I do want to be clear on that. They didn't do DeAndre Hopkins' deal, so he had void years in his contract, but it's not going to affect the Chiefs. But I'm pretty sure they did void years with Tom Bahali a couple of years ago. That was an issue, but that was a long time ago. They have used it. It's just been very sparing. So let's start. Restructure. And I'm not going to use real numbers because I'm not going to sit here and try to calculate on the fly and get this wrong. Sure. So I'm going to be using an example and saying that they're going to look at restructuring Chris Jones's deal. Now, let's say that Chris Jones has a $35 million cap hit, which is what it's close to right now. He has 4 years left on his deal. I'm going to make it 5. I'm going to make it. No, we'll call it 36 million left on his deal or for 2024. And I'm going to say he has 3 years total left. So this year, 2025, 2026, and 2027. That's not exactly what's going on, but it's close. The reason I'm doing that is because you can take that $36 million cap as long as part of it's a bonus, and you can take the bonus and you can try to spread the bonus out across the next couple of seasons. You would take the bonus and say he has again, the bonus is $36 million, and you're going to spread it across the next 3 years. So $12 million would stay in 2025, $12 million would go to 2026, and $12 million would go to 2027. That's the way a restructure works, is you take money that's due now, you create a roster bonus or an option bonus of some sort, and you say, okay, we're paying you this now, but we're going to allocate it, or the payment really doesn't even matter. That's the crazy part, because they can actually have different things when you're talking cap versus cash. It's a matter of basically accruing when that bonus is going to happen, but they may not pay the cash for 6 months, 8 months, whatever. That can be negotiated with the players. So lots of different things that go in there. But the reality is that when you restructure a contract, you're just basically taking an amount, whatever it is, and you're spreading it over what they have left in the contract. It'll hit once in that year, plus it'll hit for up to 5 years. But you can only do restructures, so you're only really going to have usually about 3 more years to play with. So, if you're talking $20 million, you'd be spreading $5 million to each of the next 5 years, of the next 4 years, this year and the next 3. Generally speaking, that's how restructures work. Extensions are very similar. Extensions, you actually are adding years, and you can add as many years as you want. although most players aren't going to do more than 2 to 3, because generally speaking, the NFL is only going to guarantee up to 3 years in a contract. Generally, not going to say that's always the case, but generally speaking, that is the case. So a great example would be looking at, what they did with Patrick. They did a 10-year agreement with him. Most of that money wasn't guaranteed, specifically guaranteed at that point, but he has to hit certain marks, and then it guarantees. If he's on the roster at this point, then something 2 years down the road guarantees. The reason they do that in his contract and other big contracts like it is because if it's fully guaranteed, then it has to go into escrow immediately to be had for later. So
that's cash in the bank sitting there.
Correct. And that's one of the biggest reasons that you'll see teams like Cincinnati struggle so much, because they're a small market team that doesn't have the money and doesn't have the funds to be able to do it. So generally speaking, when you look at Cincinnati's contracts, the only person I believe that they've given a deal to that has guarantees past the first year is Joe Burrow. They may end up guaranteeing more money down the road if they restructure or do something like that. That changes things. They have to put more money in, whatever. But that's one of the big things that Cincinnati is going against them. And that's why this contract situation with Jamar Chase could get really interesting for Cincinnati, because he is going to want a lot of guaranteed money. Oh, yeah. And the only person that they've ever done it with is Joe Burrow. Getting away from Cincinnati, that's the reality of how that works. Now, void years are a little bit like a restructure and a extension combined in a way, because a void year, say you have this big bonus of, we'll just call it $10 million to make it easy, and you have a player that is in the final year of their deal, like Joe Tooney, and you want to give him this $10 million bonus. Okay, the only way you're going to bring his cap number down is you're going to add a void year. So it looks like he's getting an extension of some sort, but he's not really getting an extension. What is happening is you're adding these void years that end the first day of the league year or the last day of the league year, and it basically accelerates all that money into the next year. So essentially what will happen is you have this $10 million bonus for Tooney, and using void years, you can get rid of it to where it's only going to hit for like $2 million a year for the next 4 years. But because it's a void year, that's how it spreads out, and you only have a $2 million cap hit in 2025. But in 2026, when the contract voids, you pick up all $8 million that was in those separate void years down below in 26, 27, 28, and 29. So that's how void years work. So you're in a situation where you can create a ton of cap space because you're using an extra 4 years that you don't really have, but you're screwing yourself for the next season. And that's where the Saints are in a very bad situation right now, where they're always taking money from the future to try to pay their bills currently.
Yeah, it's like living on a credit card. Eventually that bill's going to come due, and you're going to have to pay it anyway. So that's how you get the restructures done. Yeah, everybody has to have something. Those are some of the tools to get that done, but it all comes after the decision. Who's the first decision point? We think Nick Bolton has to be decided early. What does that look like? What are the yays and the nays for Nick Bolton back in Kansas City? It's coming up next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get into it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place your live bets throughout the game, start to finish. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can get there. You can stay in the action. And if you want to go looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlay. You got to love that because it's a new aspect. You can just roll it into it. If you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking up a player who just hit a three and you think he's getting really, really hot, you can do that in the app, and it makes it super easy. Right now, our new FanDuel customers are getting $150 in bonus bets if you first get a $5 bet that wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the NBA. This is a tough season for what you have to get done in making player decisions based on finances. We knew this would happen. When you have the type of draft classes this team has had, at some point it all comes due and you have to try to stagger or do something like that. The team has made a couple of decisions. We are going to go through the next decision point. You can find more of our work on KC Chiefs Corner, NFL 33, and RGR Football if you want to check those out as well. I will probably do a point on the linebacker group because I think linebacker is a really interesting position in the league right now about who pays for what. But this is a class that they decided the priority was Creed Humphrey. They got him extended, done deal. Trey's not part of the scenario at this point. But then it comes
tried
down
to work on Trey Smith, but didn't get it done.
Right. And they needed to come down to the two other giant names in their draft classes. There is another player that we'll talk about next week in Justin Reed that is an acquisition, but is also a free agent. But these guys are homegrown. You drafted them. You developed them. They've grown up in this system. They've both played key roles in these last 3 Super Bowls. And it's hard to make a distinction because of how much the defense has actually surged and become nearly an equal member of this team's success over the last 2 seasons to Patrick Mahomes' offense. And we all know what just happened in the Super Bowl. So I don't think it's fair to say the defensive player is automatically less important. Do you?
I don't think that they're less important. I just think that it's going to be really hard for the Chiefs to keep a guy like Nick Bolton. It depends on what he thinks his value is. The top, I'm sitting here looking at Over the Cap, and the top market linebacker right now on the market is Roquan Smith, averaging $20 million a year. Kansas City can't pay that. Kansas City shouldn't pay that. So what is his value? Fred Warner gets $19 million a year. Matt Milano, $14 million. Trey Edmonds, $18 million. Patrick Queen, 13.6, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 12.5. If they can get Bolton for close to 12.5, I would consider doing that deal. If you can't get him and it's going to be over 15, I don't see how you keep him. Not saying that they won't do it,
right?
But I don't see how you can keep him. And the one thing that we haven't mentioned, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit with Creed Humphrey getting re-signed last year. Mm-hmm. Chiefs have to, one of the things that goes into this Nick Bolton decision and the decision with Trey Smith that we're going to talk about in the next segment is what are they going to do with the guys that got drafted the year after them? Are they going to re-sign Trent McDuffie? Are they going to re-sign George Karlaftis? Because the reality is if you're going to bring both those guys back, that is going to affect directly what you're going to be able to pay a guy like Nick Bolton or Trey Smith or anybody else. So what we saw last year was they said, okay, Creed Humphrey has a year left. Trey Smith has a year left. Nick Bolton has a year left. We're going to get a deal done with Creed Humphrey. That's the approach they're going to have to take with some of these free agents that they're going to have over the coming seasons. And if they want to re-sign him, they need to re-sign him after 3 years. Another guy that maybe is going to have something to do with whether or not they re-sign Nick Bolton to a contract extension. I mean, Drew Tranquill's on the team already, but Leo Chenal is another one. Yeah. He just got through year 3. Are they going to re-sign him? He's not the name of Trent McDuffie. He's not the name of George Karlaftis, but he has played I'm not going to say vital, but he's played a very good role on this defense. And Bolton leaving would give him the ability to play an even bigger role. Is that a direction that they go?
That has to be a possibility because Leo Chenal has grown into his role, but we have to remember he was a middle linebacker at Wisconsin. He can run the middle of the defense. He can run calls. One thing that they've done very good is they bring in linebackers that can play the middle. Everyone that they have on their roster for the last 2 years has been at one time the green dot on their college defense. So they're all capable. And I think that's really important to keep an eye on. There is a scenario also that if you cannot work out a way to keep Nick Bolton, that you let Leo become the Mike and you bring back somebody that maybe ups your athleticism at the position. Old friend Willie Gay will be a free agent as well. There's an option there to keep the continuity while getting more athletic and more explosive at that second tier of the defense. And I think that is something they have to keep in mind first and foremost.
Yeah. So the big question is what does Bolton feel like his value is? I understand he was a captain. I understand that the Chiefs love him, and I have no doubt in my mind they would love to keep him. But is he going to try to command top of the linebacker market? If he does, I don't think you can pay him. He is a very good linebacker, but he is not a Fred Warner type in my mind. Is he going to be somebody that deserves to get $20 million a year, which is basically what you would have to be paying him? And I don't think so.
Not in this defense, but in somebody's defense, Nick Bolton as the field general, the center of it, the guy who runs everything, inspirational leader. If you're not trying to be as athletic, if you're trying not to be in nickel all the time, there is a world where Nick Bolton is worth more to another team than he is the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep. So I don't like it. I have friends of mine that are big Nick Bolton fans, and I don't have a problem with him. I like him. I think he's a great player. I think that he would be great to have in Kansas City for the rest of his career. He's well liked. He is a great leader. He's not as verbal or outspoken. It doesn't seem like I would expect the Mike linebacker or the leader of the defense to be, but he is obviously respected. He was the team captain for a reason. So there's that part of it. So you have to wonder, is it something that they're going to be able to get a deal done with him, or is it going to be a situation where they have to look elsewhere because he's going to command, 17, 18, $19 million a year, and you can't pay him that. Not the other part of this decision, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, is they have to figure out the left tackle position. And if you're going to pay a left tackle, I don't see how you can pay a left tackle and Bolton.
And that, unfortunately, is an A/B model that only has one answer. But it's not the left tackle that's the most pressing here. It's the right guard. What are the options for Trey Smith? That's next. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game with Prize Picks, the best place to get daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least two projections. And if you're right, then you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Easy, easy, easy. Get in on the Jayhawks. Go check out the Mizzou Tigers. Get into the action. You'll love the promos like Taco Tuesday, where you can get discounted player projections for an even better value. Download the app today and use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play a $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL, all one word, for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. This is the one that's going to be troublesome. We're going to talk right now about Trey Smith, the man next to Creed Humphrey, who I think, honestly, they are a duo that is worth more together than they are separately, despite all the positional valuations. This is a decision that will affect the rest of the offensive line, as you were just talking about the left tackle situation, if they feel they have to go out and get someone in free agency that will be very, 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 very expensive. If not, have to trade for them, which would be a whole different scenario. But it does feel right now today, as we sit here, that it is an A or B, not both decision between Nick Bolton and Trey Smith. Trey Smith, I believe, if he hits free agency, will command top of the market money. Do you disagree with that?
No, and top of the market money is $20 million a year. So here's your problem. You're going to pay Trey Smith more money than you are paying Creed Humphrey, which I don't like the precedent of that. But I get it. But the other side of it to me is then you have a scenario where how much money are you going to tie up in the offensive line? Because Jawan Taylor's at $27 million. We've already talked about Tooney at $26 million. Creed Humphrey's at 10 this year, but it will be at 20 over 18 next year. If you're going to sign a left tackle, that's going to be $20 million a year, at least, and probably more than that. So the reality is that you have to make a decision as to what you're going to build. And while I will say that the defense shouldn't take a backseat to the offense, investing money in the offensive line is something that I will always be okay with, because it should be protecting your biggest asset, which is Patrick Mahomes, and will always be Patrick Mahomes, no matter who is on this roster.
Agreed. And they have let some things slip that I think maybe make right guard not the priority that it might have been had the tackle situation worked out to this point where you felt that was solid. You didn't have to maybe go spend more money on it. Certainly they've protected themselves. If the way that this works out, the Trey Smith is not a Kansas City Chief next year. They have Hunter Norzad waiting in the wings. I think a viable candidate to go take that role. Really likes his college film, what limited action he's gotten. I think they're there. So they have a safety net is my point. So I will tell you the scenario that I would like to see, because if it came down that way and you're maybe going to roll with the tackles that you have and maybe a older off the free agent pile type tackle like they've done the last few seasons and keep that number down at left tackle, maybe you can make that $20 million area work. So for me, the franchise tag is a definite option here. I would suggest it because I think Trey understands, and he's probably torn as well, either continuing to play next to Creed Humphrey or making life-changing money for the rest of his career and life. Those two things would hang in the balance. I think if you tag him, you do have the option there to put him in another home that gives you draft capital back, gives him the ability to get an even higher contract from another team. And you have enough connections around the league that I think that type of trade, especially for one team in particular, the Chicago Bears, would be a viable path to getting all these things done.
I agree with you. There's a couple of problems. And first, and I know we're done talking about Nick Bolton, but I do want to say tagging Nick Bolton is not something you can do. The linebacker tag is $27 million. So I just want to be clear on that. That's not a chance that they're going to tag him. Right. And a transition tag is 22. So it's still not really an option for Nick Bolton. That's above what you would pay him at a linebacker. Now, offensive line, it's still a little dicey because the tag number for an offensive lineman is just offensive lineman. You don't have it per position. So you're looking at $25 million as a tag number for Trey Smith. Can you do it? Yes. But remember, if you do that, you have to have that money free as of when you tag them. And that would mean that they're going to have to free up $25 million in cap space. And that's going to be something that they're going to have to do. That's going to be a significant move. And they can get that from Mahomes by himself. So it's not that they can't do it, but it would be significant. They could tag him. They could transition tag him, which would be, sorry, I'm looking at the numbers. I apologize. Just under 23 million. So not much difference between a transition tag and a franchise tag. And that's just the normal franchise tag. That's not even looking at exclusive rights, which I don't think that they would do, which would be even more expensive. So those are kind of the numbers that you're looking at. I would not be shocked if they franchise tag Trey Smith. I do think that could be something that would get him moved. But I also will say that I don't think that there's any way that they plan on him playing under a franchise tag. So if they franchise him, he is getting traded. And I can't believe that if they franchise him, they think that they can get a deal done with him long term.
I tend to agree with that. And I think for both his future, for the Chiefs' future, and for another team's future, I think that probably is the best case scenario for all, especially for a team that has cap space to burn and has an elite quarterback in the making that they have to protect.
Yeah. And really, the whole decision is going to come down to what Trey Smith wants. Because if Trey Smith wants to be in Kansas City, he has the opportunity to be in Kansas City. I guarantee you Brett Veach would find him a deal it's not going to be top of market. But the reality is like what you said is semi-true, but I disagree with it to an extent. And the reason I disagree is because I don't think that there's a large enough, and to be clear, it's not my money. I understand that. But I don't think that there's a large enough difference between taking $16, $17, $18 million and taking a top of the market $22 million a year contract. Yes, there's a difference of $4 million a year. If you're going, let's say the Chiefs will offer him 18 and he wants 22. Yeah, there's $4 million a year difference. $18 million a year is still going to be life-changing money. And you get to play with your best friend. You get to play with Patrick Mahomes. You get a chance to chase rings in Kansas City. I think that there can be a case made for that. But that's the question is, does he want to be the highest paid guard? Because if he wants to be the highest paid guard, I can't see Kansas City doing that. Can they? Yes. Will they? I don't think so, and I can't see it happening in Kansas City. But like I said, 18 million is still life-changing money. 18 million per year is still life-changing money, and a relationship with Creed Humphrey, a relationship with Patrick Mahomes. You're he's not going to make $4 million a year in Kansas City doing ads. I understand that. He's going to give up money by staying in Kansas City if that's what he wants to do. But it's a question of, do you want to play with your best friend, or do you want to play in Chicago and probably not have a great chance of being in the Super Bowl? That's the reality. I would say going forward, Kansas City's chance of making the Super Bowl is probably close to 20 to 25% a year as long as Mahomes is here. Without looking at anything else, if Mahomes is
just
here,
his presence,
20 to 25%. You're not going to have that anywhere else in the league outside of maybe Buffalo, and I don't know, Cincinnati maybe. I mean, some of those very, very elite quarterbacks, but you're not going to get that. And maybe Caleb Williams can get him there in Chicago, but you have to believe in that going into it, and you have to know if that's where you're going to end up going, that there's a possibility you could be done every year in December or very, very early January because you don't make the playoffs on a regular basis.
That's true, but I would argue back if I'm somebody in Trey's camp, the possibility that if Caleb Williams gets protection, that you will provide and be the leader of that group, and they continue to build around it, that he could be a guy that gets you to that point, that becomes the next Patrick Mahomes. And the good thing is Ryan Poles is the next offensive lineman. There's literally no one around the league, including Mike Borgonzi, who you could work deals with as well, that has been both in the Chiefs front office in the past and sees the value of the offensive line more than Ryan Poles. So I do think that there is a special scenario there that would allow something to get done.
Yeah, no, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Chicago can't become a team that could do that. They possibly could. I'm just not ready to put Caleb Williams in the same era as Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or any of the other, and Justin Herbert to a lesser extent, or any of those other QBs that are way up there. Jalen Hurts, obviously, in the NFC, you would have to contend with on a yearly basis, in Goff and anybody else that's in Jordan Love and all those guys. So you're going to have issues going elsewhere. But the question is, when it comes to any of these players, it's what do you want to get paid? Do you want? You want to get paid obviously as much as you possibly can. Are you willing to take a little bit less to stay in Kansas City and know that you have a chance to chase rings? Because the reality is that the Chiefs can look at it and say, look, we've made the AFC Championship game every single year that Patrick's played. We've been to 5 Super Bowls. We will continue going to Super Bowls. We will continue playing the AFC Championship game and having a chance to play in the Super Bowl. We can guarantee you that. I don't think that's too outlandish to say as an organization. And anywhere else you go is not going to be able to tell you that, period. So it depends on what you want to play for. And if it's just about the extra, $20 million you could get over a 5-year deal. Absolutely. It's possible that he could get an extra $20 million if he plays out the contract wherever he goes elsewhere. Because I don't think Kansas City will pay him top of the market money to play guard.
I think you're probably right. Let's see who will. We will find out more as they go through. New league year in about a month. Should be some things happening before then. We will keep you apprised. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Thank you for being with us. Make sure that you are liked and you're sub to this channel as we're going to work through all of the offseason, top, bottom, and around. And that's not even counting the draft. We're just talking free agency right now. A lot to go into this Chiefs offseason. Make sure you keep it with us. Thank you for your time. We'll talk to you Monday.